We're back, and I'm very pleased to say we're joined by an old friend and valued colleague, an import from New Zealand, a foreign-born American patriot, a national treasure by my lights. His name is Trevor Loudon. He has been warning for a long time about the dangers we face from the enemy within, and we wanted to talk with him a bit about the fact that the Chinese Communist Party has, among other things, been actively recruiting members of our elite in general, business and academic and cultural, but also political. And among others, have seemingly got their hooks into the commander in chief of the United States. Trevor Loudon, it's great to have you back with us in Securing America. How big a problem is it if even the President of the United States himself has been compromised by our most mortal enemy, the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, thanks very much, Frank. Yes, well, I like to say that the leaders of the three most powerful countries in the world, today, United States, Russia, and China, all have their roots in the communist movement. Obviously, China is very explicit about that. Joe Biden has been deeply compromised by the Chinese Communist Party. He's appointed several cabinet ministers with similar compromise, several cabinet officers with similar, Chinese backgrounds, and his own personal history, starting back in the 70s, through the groups like the Council for a Livable World, has been working to advance first Soviet, then Russian foreign policy and Iranian foreign policy. And right now he is alienating America's allies, Israel, and to some degree Saudi Arabia, with his insistence on Iran nuclear deal. He doesn't want to buy oil from Russia, but he wants to buy it from Iran and Venezuela, who are both Russian allies. Yeah, I think the reason we're seeing the advance in Ukraine right now and the saber rattling from China, etc., is that China and Russia both see that their friend is in the White House, America is weak, NATO is divided, and this is the time to strike and ultimately change the entire balance of power in the world. That's how serious I think the situation is.
Well, the president has gone to great lengths this week, of course, to try to establish that NATO is unified. I think the Russians and Chinese have figured out that there are fault lines that can be exploited. But let me ask you about one other facet of this. And you've written extensively, including in a magnum opus titled The Enemies Within, about the fact that the Congress of the United States, on both sides of the aisle to some extent, have also been compromised by the Chinese communists. Trevor, that makes oversight and corrective action from that quarter much more unlikely, of course. Talk about the magnitude of that problem, though.
Well, I say there's about 100 members of the US Congress and about 25 members of the US Senate who are so compromised by the Chinese, the Iranians, even the Cubans and local communist and Islamist elements, that they couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus in any county in the United States. But they're running every major committee in the Congress and the Senate. Intelligence, Homeland Security, armed services are all controlled by people who are deeply compromised by our enemies. And I think we're living in a country that's really being run more out of China than it is out of Washington.
To the extent that that is so, Trevor, and again, you have, from your own experience in New Zealand, insights into what it means when the government effectively falls into line with enemies of that country. What are the implications if we, in fact, have reason to believe that the Chinese seek our destruction, for example, that the president may well be required, as a practical matter, to do their bidding? Is that not the kind of national security crisis that could put the country in, well, jeopardy and cries out, as I say, for corrective action of some kind.
Well, look, this is the existential survival of the United States we're talking about here. You know, the Biden administration just gave Afghanistan to China. You know, with all of the minerals and everything that has now, China did have an American base on its western flank, and that would have deterred them to some degree from striking out to the Pacific. That problem is now solved. And that's upsetting India, it's upsetting Japan, it's upsetting Taiwan. All of those countries are now vulnerable, as is South Korea and the Philippines, even Australia. Biden basically gave the green light to Russia to advance into Ukraine. And it won't stop with Ukraine. It'll be the Baltic states, it'll be Eastern Europe, and eventually Western Europe. So this is the long anticipated push by America's enemies to diminish, basically make America a second or even third rate power. And so we are living in a world run out of Moscow and Beijing. It couldn't be more serious. And the fact that we have a president in the White House who is completely compromised and a vice president who is also completely compromised is, I think, the most serious national security crisis America has faced since the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Trevor. And I'm fond of saying that, what we see as kind of a wrecking operation on the part of the Biden team has actually benefited enormously the Chinese communists and arguably the Russians who seek the destruction of this country as a freedom loving, powerful nation, to say nothing of the impediment to the realization of their ambitions more broadly. Trevor, we're going to have to take a quick break here in just a moment, but I think what this argues for, if Congress is not going to provide the requisite oversight and corrective action, would be a special prosecutor, or something our colleague Sam Faddis has recommended. Would you agree?
Oh, look, absolutely. We have to be working towards an impeachment of the president. We have to be doing that. Has to be on the table. This is way more serious than anything Nixon did. This is betrayal of the country we're looking at here, the survival of the country. So that would be a great first step. Absolutely.
Well, this is a necessary, perhaps not sufficient condition, but we need to get on with it. And again, not
Yeah.
just the president, but the senior subordinates that he has put in place that have been compromised as well. Trevor, we have to take a short break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk further about the implications of the larger problem